Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. My name's Jerry Spence. I will be moderating today for Everything Everywhere All at Once, new facility, new layout, new automation, and WMS upgrade. I'm excited for today. I think our panel has put in the work and prep to walk you through really I'll say a years long project in setting up Saint Gobain for their future. And Brandon, if you want to go to the next slide so I can go over a couple of the details. Everyone has been muted. Please, if you have a question, put that in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and then interrupting and asking the panel those questions as they come up. And just a slight disclaimer, I will read the information discussed in this session represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice or views of Alpine. You should consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel as needed for your specific situations. With that, I will pass it over for the panel to introduce themselves. And Tony, I believe we're going to start with you.
All right, great. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. My name is Tony Marcelino. I'm the Senior Director of Supply Chain for North America here at Saint Gobain. And I was very heavily involved in this project. And that's a little bit about myself for now.
All right, I'll go next. Hi, I'm Jesse Hardy. I'm Director of Regional Sales for Systems in Motion. Systems in Motion is a turnkey material handling equipment integrator, so we partner closely with Saint Gobain Abrasives on this project in their move from their Plainfield, Indiana distribution center to Brownsburg, Indiana. Brandon?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, everyone. Brandon Novak, Managing Director at Alpine. Much like Jesse, we partnered with both SIM and Saint Gobain on this project to help assist with some of the analysis and move plan and layout of the building. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about some of the background of the project. And Tony, if you would like to provide some background on what was the original need for this project and how it all got started.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. So we, Saint Gobain, and we have various divisions. This division in particular is focused on abrasive products. And we had a distribution center just outside of Indianapolis, and where we ship a lot of orders from. And we basically had that organized in two different ways in terms of our outbound. We had one area was our parcel shipping area, and another area is truckload LTL shipping. So during one of my visits to the location about a year and a half ago now, we started a project to basically look at our parcel area to see what kind of improvements we can make. So we organized the Kaizen, followed the Kaizen methodology. And as we went through that project, it started to become very clear to myself and other members of the team at the time that we had a real opportunity here to look for some investment that could help us automate the whole process from end to end. So it's at that time that we reached out to Jesse's team at Systems in Motion and asked them to get involved in looking at our process to see how they may be able to help us. So, Jesse.
All right, thanks, Tony. Yes, Tony mentioned as a part of that Kaizen process at Saint Gobain, we Systems in Motion were called in to start taking a look at their conveyor system, where they were manifesting and shipping packages out of, and look at opportunities for automation and improvement. So we set up some initial site visits and got some background from the team and did a deep dive into what opportunities existed with that equipment to start putting a solution together for them. So the system that Saint Gobain Abrasives had initially was very manual. They were picking product to pre-built cases and then dropping them off from a cart pick to a manifest line. Cases would accumulate, and a shipping operator would grab the case. They would identify the order, print out a packing slip on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with a laser printer, fill the case with void fill, put a shipping label on, and then run through a case sealer. And as shown in the picture here in the slide deck, the cases would commingle at a central merge point, but then had to be manually pulled off and sent back out to a couple different carriers. So there were a lot of different issues that presented themselves here, or better opportunities for improvement, we should say, with cases getting commingled or sent on the wrong truck. So FedEx got mixed with UPS and vice versa. A lot of time spent at the packaging stations, and just from a sustainability standpoint, the corrugate that was being used and the void fill. So we started looking at each one of the operations and where we could add automation with sortation, either automating the void fill process or going through right size packaging, looking at automatic application of shipping labels and packing slips. And then as the project grew, we were looking at more and more things with it. We wanted to do a QC check on picked items for weights, make sure there are no items that were mispicked in the system. The void fill and the corrugate usage became a particular interest as Tony and the team got more involved and starting to look at sustainability initiatives globally and reduction of the carbon footprint. There was a packaging audit done, and there was a significant amount of air being shipped with the cases from a cartonization standpoint, and then just some general issues with dim weight chargebacks from the shipping carriers. So that's when we started to heavily explore right size packaging with the team, and ended up landing on a Spark CVP Impact right size packaging machine. Was a really good fit. Had a really nice ROI in terms of reduction of corrugate usage, eliminated almost nearly all of their void fill usage, and then with the machine and the weight checks that we built in, got them an accurate dim weight for their shipping chargebacks, and being able to identify if there were any mispicked items that were inside the system. So as we started finalizing the design with sortation, automatic print and apply, and the Spark CVP Impact machine, conversations started to grow within the facility, and that's when Tony had re-engaged us about the space and utilization, and if there was something we could do there.
Okay, so I could talk a little bit about that next step there. So as we were doing this project, we also were coming up on the lease for the building that we were in. We had been in that building for 20 years, and the lease was coming due. And we knew we had done a lot of work over the years in terms of inventory optimization. So we knew we didn't need as much space as what we had. So the first idea was to look at how do we consolidate within the building that we were in so that we could potentially move the demising wall and give some space back to the landlord as we look to renew the lease. So again, we engaged at that point with the Alpine team to help us do an analysis of the space. You know, how much space do we truly need based on the volume of orders that we had and based on the different SKU counts that we had. And in Alpine, I could let Brandon talk about that a bit, but that was a tremendous help for us at the time. So, Brandon?
Yep, thanks, Tony. So we were then brought in to, as Tony just discussed, really analyze the space. So taking a look at those volumes, looking at peak volume, how fast certain items are moving, looking at the cube dimensions of these items and how much space is needed to get through for the outbound volume. And so we performed our storage type analysis to look at the ideal opening size, how much of certain types of racking do we need, the different type of racking options that we could fit in the building, and then including growth and everything else that we want to make sure, because if we're going to potentially give back some space, we want to make sure obviously it's still workable for the future. So looking at the current building being around 400,000 square feet, looking at the data and the design that we could come up with and fit the inventory in, we kind of settled around about 275,000 square feet is what was looking like could be a right size for Saint Gobain, and being able to give back some of that floor space back to the landlord. And so once that analysis was completed, we were able to provide that information back to Tony and the Saint Gobain team, and then they were able to then start having some of those additional conversations with the landlord. And then Tony can elaborate on how that eventually turned into the decision for a new building.
Yeah, no, that's great. So once we had this information, which was key for us so that we knew what size we needed, we started to engage with our landlord in negotiations for a new lease. And as we did that, it became apparent that our costs were going to go up significantly. So as a result of that, I started to look elsewhere. I started to look at other options. I started to look at the option to potentially move to a new building. So we did look at several sites. We did a lot of work around making sure that whatever site we picked was within a drivable distance of our employees in terms of where they lived. So we were very careful with that so that we minimized any turnover. And we ended up finding a location in Brownsburg, Indiana, about 10 miles north of where we were in Plainfield. And that through the negotiations that we did and the good data that we had from Brandon, we were able to negotiate a 12-year deal. And we then just started the project and started the planning process for the move to the new building.
And so here now we have starting to transition from our original project of, hey, we're going to just try and redesign within this one building, to now we have a new building in Brownsburg. We have the existing building in Plainfield, and now we have a move plan that needs to get developed. And so Alpine, in conjunction with the Saint Gobain team, started putting together a pretty comprehensive move plan around what is going to be needed to get done in this building. And so given that this is a new building, there was everything that needs to get done in terms of just regular construction of a new building. And then factoring on top of that, the actual move of the product from Plainfield to Brownsburg, what the timing is going to look like, and how that is going to be performed. So we started putting together a move plan that I believe ended up close to 450 execution tasks that needed to be done. Everything from signage for the building, internal and external communication, ordering furniture, ordering equipment, identifying personnel that needs to be in the different buildings, and really starting to go through what that plan is going to look like and how long it's going to take. Now that the negotiation of the buildings has been done, we had an exit date that needed to be met in Plainfield. So working backwards from that date and trying to understand what needs to be done, in addition to putting the new drawing in the new building, how everything's going to fit, and then working with Sim as well on the Spark layout that they had designed for the Plainfield building and making sure that that works in the Brownfield building as well. So at this point, the project kind of pivots a little bit into this new move plan and redesign for the new building. And so what happened with the new building is we came up with this design, worked very closely, obviously, with both the Sim team and the Saint Gobain teams, and started putting together this design on how we could best fit everything in the building. But also, once again, we had discussed the potential for future growth, possible automation, new automation that was going to be there, as Tony mentioned previously. So when we came up with this design, there are a few new aspects of the design that previously had not been exposed to the Saint Gobain team prior, such as the very narrow aisles. We added a couple of those to house the slower moving items in the warehouse. And with that comes a new pick and pass operation throughout the system. And so we are introducing a couple new things to the team in addition to the Spark machine as well. And so as we're introducing all of these new concepts and new processes, there's also some system testing that's going on in the background as well to ensure that this is working. And I'll let Tony expand a little bit on what was being done on the Saint Gobain side, from organization of the teams to handle the new system testing.
Yep. So thanks, Brandon. So for this project, we knew we had to build a really solid plan. I think Brandon alluded to that earlier. And so we really put a lot of time into that. And we probably planned for several months. We engaged internally our IT teams, our purchasing teams. We engaged our safety teams. So we had a pretty cross-functional group of folks. We had inventory planning, the rest of the supply chain team. So very extensive planning that we did for this, and part of the planning really focused on testing as well. So we had a few key elements to the plan. One was that we were going to build some additional inventories so that we could operate in both facilities as we transition customers from one to the other. That was the strategy. And then, I'd say the other big thing was to make sure that we tested everything thoroughly. We have obviously our ERP system, we have our warehouse management system, we have a transportation management system. All of that is integrated and talking to each other. We were now introducing yet another system with this parcel automation investment that was going to also have to talk to our ordering systems. So there was an awful lot of testing, and we ended up deciding to dedicate about 4 to 5 weeks to testing before we moved anything. So just to summarize, we built up probably about 2 months of extra inventory before the move started, and we really flushed out a really solid testing plan so that we knew when we started shifting customers over to the new site that we would minimize the hiccups that we would have with shipping orders.
And I will say from the Alpine side, we've done many warehouse moves, and I will say the Saint Gobain team did put in that level of effort in planning that is typically not seen with regards to the testing that was being done. They had flown in people, everybody in a room, a bunch of different cross-functional individuals, making sure that they were testing everything from end to end, not just with the new processes that were existing in the new building, but also ensuring that orders from the old building were still going to invoice properly. Orders from the new building were invoicing properly, getting everything all the way to the end. What to do if an item needed to be received in the old building, but is actually needed at the new building. What is the fastest way we can get that inventory systematically over, and working through all of those different scenarios, because the plan was to operate both buildings at the same time, which leads us to everything happening twice, having both the Brownsburg building and the Plainfield building operating at the same time. And I'll let Tony expand on how this process went and some of the planning that went into that.
Sure. Yeah. So we ship a high volume of orders. We have a high SKU count. So what we decided to do was we would continue to ship out of the old building, and we would transition one customer at a time for the first month, so that we could really make sure that from a customer perspective, things were working right. We were able to pick correctly. We were able to process through the new parcel automation line, and we would be able to invoice correctly to the customer. So we kind of started slow, and we started with 2 customers a week. And then once we felt confident that we had worked out a lot of the initial hiccups that you tend to go through, even though we did tremendous amount of testing, we still had some things that we found as we started to convert the customers over to the new building. And and then once we were confident, then we started to move multiple customers over at a time. So you could imagine that we had 2 buildings at one point with our staff split between both buildings, still shipping out of the old building, now shipping out of the new building as well. We had some learning curve, obviously, out of the new building. Some of the processes were new for us. The parcel automation is something the team was not accustomed to working with. The very narrow aisles that we put in the design of the warehouse so that we could fit into a smaller space is not something they were familiar with. So there were some growing pains for our employees. But I think the way we split the staff was definitely challenging. It caused us to work some unexpected weekends to make sure we weren't falling behind on our order volume. But in the end, I think it ended up working well. And the teams were very engaged, very involved. We made sure that we set up a SWAT team out in the warehouse So, myself, the site manager, the rest of the management team was present on the floor at all times, so that we could be there to help support the team as we went through this transition. So, all in all, it was a bit stressful, but we definitely got through it, and it was a success.
Tony, quick question as we talk about the associates and keeping them engaged. Would you say overall the morale was okay with the move and the new location? How did the associates handle it? What was the communication uh, that you took with your local team there?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jerry. So we started to communicate this to our associates as soon as we had the lease signed of the new building. We wanted to make sure we engaged them early on. We wanted to have a lot of transparency. We wanted them to know that we were committing to a long-term play in a new location. We wanted them to know where it was located so that they could think about their commute times, and see that it didn't impact their commute times too much. And then we actually had some folks come here to do some visits as well, and they would kind of go back and tell everyone about the new place, and I think that generated a bit of excitement. It's when you go from a 20-year-old building to a brand new building that it had just finished being constructed. I think there's a little bit of excitement that comes with that, and and then we definitely made sure that we kept gave folks a lot of support here as they were learning new things. We made sure that we kept our management team, I would say, kind of 80-20. 80% of our management team was at the new place, and we had a smaller staff of management at the old place, even though they were still handling a lot of the volume initially, because we wanted to make sure we were here to help support, help train, help answer questions. A lot of pizza, a lot of food was brought in to make sure that we were taking care of our folks. Bottled water, anything we could do to really keep the spirits high.
Great, thank you. Because you did have a lot of tenure, if I recall correctly, with your team there. So I know it was very important that you kept that experience in the new building, even with some of the processes changing. I know the associates adapted quickly and well to that. Would you agree?
Yes, yes. So we very tenured team here. We have several employees that have been here upwards of 20 years, and so yeah, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to be too disruptive to their lives, this move. And as they got into the building and started to see the processes, I think they got more and more comfortable with it. I think they were a little skeptical at first that we're moving into such a much smaller building, right? Than what they were used to. So there was a little skepticism by folks, but I remember talking to a number of them after we had been in here for a couple of months, where they said, "Yeah, I think this is going to work." So I think we're in good shape. So.
And Jesse, you want to touch on, as we're doing both buildings at the same time, we're also reusing the rack from Plainfield to Brownsburg, and how that process went.
Yeah, it definitely presented some challenges with itself. And Tony mentioned being visible and communicating with the associates. It got very visible at one point in time. So a couple of decisions were made with the date to end the current lease at the old building and when we had to move out by, and then the ramp up plan for the new building. And then on top of that, we decided to reuse a good amount of racking from the old building and move it to the new building, in conjunction with some new materials that were brought in. So we were presented with that challenge of how do we maintain operations out of the old building while tearing down racking and getting it installed in the new building. So it was a bit of a juggle. We were down to almost sometimes bay by bay positions where we had a team dismantling rack where guys were wanting to pick out of, and trying to flip things around maybe overnight, to get racking torn down and items put back in for the next day's picking. So certainly had to juggle that. Brought the racking in, got it stood up, went through labeling and getting everything set up. And I'll give a huge shout out to Tony's team in their their planning process. It's unlike anything we saw before with testing scenarios and a day-by-day plan for what was going to go when and where. And when things were going to happen. So we ran the system through the ringer of a lot of different scenarios. So any sort of unique ordering situations, um, possible errors that we would see to make sure that the system we were bringing online was going to be robust and ready to go when the full orders hit. So we brought on some of those initial customers that had some of the unique situations to make sure that everything ran through. Tony mentioned introducing the new system. So in conjunction with the new building, the new VNA racking, the new picking process, we introduced a WCS with our automation as well. So that was a completely new process for the team there.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So at this moment, we now have two buildings, both running at the same time. We have new processes that the team is getting associated with. We have the new systems, as Jesse just mentioned. We have the WCS plus some new processes that were laid into the old system. The volume, as Tony mentioned earlier, is still being very consistent. There really wasn't a dip or anything like that, and we had planned to increase inventory to account for this. So you have more receiving volume happening at the same time. And so now we're starting to wonder, okay, how are we measuring ourselves during this move? Our customers getting their order. We have new temp staff happening. Is billing happening, and making sure that all of this stuff is happening at the same time. And so to do that, we got to figure out how, are we doing well? What type of KPIs do we have that we're planning for? And so I'll pass it back to Tony. As Jesse had mentioned previously, the amount of planning that was done on the Saint Gobain side was far and away the most I've ever seen, even getting down to, hourly or half day type of measurements they were looking at to ensure that we are meeting the goals and the processes that we had set forth.
Yeah. So with the move, we obviously, when you run an operation this size, you tend to have KPIs. But with the move, we needed a series of new KPIs. So we dedicated some time to putting those together. Things like what's the productivity going to be out of the new VNA aisle? What's the productivity going to be through the parcel automation? What should we expect? What does good look like? We needed to kind of double check that we were invoicing correctly once the package went out the door. So we had to introduce some new KPIs there. We also had to make sure that as we transition from one building to the other, managing the letdown of the inventory at the old building while managing the increase of inventory at the new building was very important. So we had tracking to make sure that was happening per our plan on a daily basis. We had KPIs around how many trucks were leaving that were transferring product from the old building to the new building, and were we on track with the number of trucks, and were we receiving them on time? Were we doing our cycle counts before we put the product away correctly? So there were just a series of KPIs that we installed and put in place to monitor, and we were watching these pretty much hour by hour, I'd say, in that first month in which the move was taking place. So they were very helpful to us. So highly recommend doing that if you're ever going to go through a move like this.
Yeah, and with the level of detail that they were looking at, as Tony had mentioned, hour by hour, the team, as was previously mentioned, a very tenured staff, so they knew what they were supposed to be achieving hour by hour, how many lines, how many cases. So if we weren't achieving that and the numbers were a little low, it was felt by the team. The team just knew, oh, something's not right here. Are we not getting the orders? Are things not dropping? What's happening? Are we not getting the volume through fast enough? And so during that time, Tony had asked Alpine to come back and take a look at some of those KPIs with them to try and figure out where there might be opportunities for some of the productivity to be increased. And so working with the Saint Gobain team, we went back on site and performed some time studies, looked at the overall processes, where things were being done, end to end of every process from receiving to picking, put away, replenishments, making sure that there was no wasted time, no wasted effort in the processes. And then what we had identified is there just was some opportunity for some visual management to be done throughout the warehouse. So identifying, what's been processed, what's still open, showing the amount of volume that's left, so everybody is aware, and having that information visible where the associates are dropping off work and picking up work as well. So it wasn't somewhere they had to go out of their way to try and see some information on how the shift is performing. It was just there in a place that they would pass regularly throughout the day. So identifying that and having the management be a little bit more visible out on the floor, especially in those early weeks where obviously the leads and the supervisors are very busy. They're tackling 100 different issues, and the associates are out there working, getting the work done, but not having the regular leads and supervisors as present as they normally would be, because we're still in the middle of this move. So once those managers and leads and supervisors kind of got back into their regular routine, really helped get the productivity back to what Saint Gobain was anticipating and expecting as well. And then also the Spark machine is brand new for them. So I'll let Jesse talk through some of the measurements and how they were analyzing the Spark machine's success and throughput.
Yeah, sure. So I'll rib Tony a little bit. He'll probably hate me for saying this, but it was really easy to see the visual management side on the early phases. So not only were we moving racking, we were moving whiteboards and TVs, and before that stuff got set up, we were tracking lines by hour on a large sheet of cardboard. So anytime I'd walk in the facility, I knew where we were at because I could go find that sheet, and it was very relevant or prevalent to see. And then we graduated eventually, but yeah, with that we introduced the WCS with the Spark. So as we were digging into those KPIs, we started developing some custom reports for diverts, missed diverts, maybe label issues or read issues, scan issues. That way we could see where problem areas were at with maybe order entry or how things were being processed to help dig back in. So I commend the team there too for a lot of root cause analysis. We'd have issues, maybe the line would go down, and digging back in to find out where it was at. And we were running with that SWAT team on hand and trying to get them educated on if the line went down for a missed label read or the printer jammed or whatever the issue may be, helping show ways to recover that and create some super users within the team that can help recover the line and get it back going right away. As well as with the Spark equipment, we did some training with the team there to talk through machine recoveries. We got some experts on hand with that, so that they could quickly troubleshoot if there were downtime issues. Plus, that equipment's it's connected to the outside world from through an outside network. So if there's an issue, someone can be on a phone with a technician across the country or across the globe and help to recover that. But yeah, we just tried to build up the expertise with that equipment and get the users in place and comfortable with how to interface with that with the new automation and learn their way around it for the completely new process.
Thanks, Jesse. And one thing I'm curious about, Tony, so we're talking about how this was measured and viewed within the team that was working on it. How was this viewed at Saint Gobain with the move overall internally there? Was this a successful project as the hindsight on how it performed after a couple months now?
Yeah. So I guess I'll say that, as we were moving, we talked a little bit about our productivity level wasn't at the expected level. So we definitely had, fell behind a little bit. And, but what we did is we made sure we were very engaged with our customer service, our sales organization, communicating daily on what was going on here and what we were doing to address different things so that they had an awareness. But I would say on the whole, this was seen by the company as a very successful project. I think it was recognized the magnitude of the project and the difficulty level. Our goal was to make sure we didn't lose any sales. It was to make sure that we didn't. Our entire focus and the entire strategy and plan was built around not impacting our customers, and the organization widely viewed that as a tremendous success. So I think we're all very happy with the outcome of this entire plan. And even, even we didn't mention it, but even getting out of the old building was a big part of this, and getting out on time. Obviously, you have a deadline to move out, and we were successful there as well. So very, very successful project here.
Great. Thanks, Tony. So with any project of this magnitude, there's always the what would we do differently? What lessons were learned? And so, Jesse, I'll start with you from the sim standpoint. What do you think you would do differently, or if we had the opportunity to do it all again?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's always 2020. So when you're in the thick of things, it's tough to sometimes see the forest for the trees, and you've got that action right in front of you that you need to take care of, and then you look back at it, it's like, man, if we would have done this differently, it'd been better. And I would say, from an automation perspective, we were trying to operate out of two buildings at the same time, and sometimes the right resources might have been at the old building when we needed it in the new building, and vice versa. Or so and so knows how to recover the machine, but they're working down in Plainfield today moving this, and so then we got to try to train somebody up. So making sure that we've got all of the potential maintenance resources trained ahead of starting any sort of equipment, and having some redundancy in there would be a great thing to implement in a future project like this. The other thing I would say too that we ran into, we were doing picking weight QC checks within the system, where we would go across a scale, check to make sure all the items were in there, and naturally data gets missed, or items get changed, weights start to grow or change. So we experienced some heartburn with that as we went through, because the scale caught what it was supposed to catch, and then we were going back systematically trying to get things updated. So if you're going to get into something like that in the future, making sure the data is as accurate as it can be going into it, and that's a challenge, and we get that, but just things to be mindful of. We did a great job testing here, but that's something still, even if you could go through looking at any what if scenarios that could happen. What if a person put a box in the conveyor system here instead of here where they're supposed to be? What if they took it off here and did this with it? Looking at all these ways that someone can manipulate and interact with the system, and making sure we understand how it's going to recover. Those are good situations to put the system through as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, and I think the amount of planning that was done on this, as we mentioned several times, still far exceeded most moves I've been a part of, and still it seemed like we could have done more. There could have been more time spent on change management and communication, even though it seemed like we did more than most. It still felt like afterwards we could have probably focused on a little bit more communication, or a little bit more specific or targeted type of communication with examples. And one of those examples was just even came down to the rack labels. So the labeling that existed in the Plainfield building was different than what we did in the Brownsburg building. So we ended up creating a new rack label that had the information presented differently than what it was previously. And so it was actually a different type of rack label than we've ever used previously. We made it and designed it in a way that it could be changed. So if we wanted to have specific item information for what is in that location, we made a little area that you could attach a little magnet with the information for that item on the label. And then if that item were to change out of that location, you just remove the magnet and replace it with another magnet that has the current information of that item. And so that was a decent change for the associates, because they have been trained to have their eyes go specifically to this one area of the rack label, and that's just what they had been used to all those years in the other building. And so that was one thing I realized, that we didn't place enough emphasis on training the team to what the new rack label would look like, and what type of information they would come to expect on those labels, because it was different than what they had previously seen. And how about you, Tony? What would be done differently, or what lessons did you take away from this project?
I think there's two main things for me. One, and it's already been mentioned, is I would have dedicated more time to testing. I think we dedicated about 5 weeks, but we probably could have dedicated more time than that, so that we could have worked through some of the initial hiccups that we had. before moving any customer orders over. The second thing I think I would have done different is I probably would have created a small committee of a few key employees to help kind of be part of the design, be part of the discussions, and really give us their input around the very detailed flow through the building. We had worked out the macro view, with work with help from Brandon, but I would say kind of that more micro view of where do we want, the forklifts driving through, where we want them turning, little things like that, I think would have helped make things perhaps flow more easily for our employees as they came into the new building. So I would say those two areas I would have done a little different.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. Panelists, thank you very much. Are there any other questions coming from any of the participants? Give it a quick second to see if anyone's typing. If not, nothing's coming through. So, Tony, thank you very much. Jesse, thank you. Brandon, thank you for your time today. Dave, obviously, thank you for help coordinating this behind the scenes. We appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights, and most importantly, the honesty and candor about the good, the bad, right? Where we can improve and the lessons we can learn. So I appreciate that. And with that, we'll end this, and everyone have a great rest of your day. And we appreciate you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.